In the race to create affordable cars, some manufacturers took shortcuts that led to some of the dumbest and most baffling designs ever put on the road. These cars, aimed at budget-conscious buyers, were often plagued with strange design choices, poor performance, and ridiculous features that made them more of a headache than a bargain. While they may have been cheap, they certainly weren't smart purchases. Ready to see 13 of the dumbest cars that only those strapped for cash could afford? Get ready to cringe at these automotive disasters. The early Toyota Crown, produced from 1955 to 1962, was a symbol of Toyota's ambition to establish itself in the global automobile market, but its design reflected the company's struggle to balance tradition with modernity. The Crown was one of the first Japanese cars intended for both domestic and international markets, and it bore the weight of representing Japanese engineering on a global stage. However, its design choices, heavily inspired by American luxury vehicles of the 1950s, left it looking overly ornate, bulky, and dated, especially when compared to the sleek, modern cars emerging as the 1960s approached. At first glance, the Toyota Crown's design was a blend of heavy chrome accents, large fenders, and a somewhat over-the-top exterior that tried to convey a sense of luxury and grandeur. Toyota clearly took inspiration from American cars, which were popular in Japan at the time, but the Crown lacked the finesse and elegance that made those American vehicles stand out. The result was a car that seemed to be trying too hard to impress, using design elements that felt exaggerated and out of place on a relatively small and modest vehicle like the Crown. The front of the early Toyota Crown was particularly adorned with chrome, featuring a large grille that seemed to dominate the face of the car. This grille was flanked by oversized headlights, which gave the front end a heavy, cumbersome appearance. The abundance of chrome on the grille, along with chrome accents running along the sides and bumpers, created a sense of visual clutter. Rather than exuding the sleek modernity seen in many European and American contemporaries, the Crown's front end felt excessive and dated, more reminiscent of the previous decade than a forward-looking design. The car's body was also notable for its large fenders and prominent wheel arches, which added to its bulky, almost bloated appearance. The fenders bulged out from the sides of the car, giving it a wide, heavy stance that contrasted sharply with the slim and streamlined profiles that were beginning to define the 1960s automotive aesthetic. The rounded, bulbous shape of the Crown further contributed to its outdated look, making it appear less agile and more ponderous compared to the sharp, angular lines that were becoming the norm in modern car design. One of the most noticeable aspects of the Toyota Crown's design was its attempt to mimic the luxurious appeal of American sedans, but on a much smaller and less refined scale. The car featured details such as two-tone paint schemes, elaborate badges, and chrome trimming that were clearly meant to give it a premium feel. However, instead of achieving the desired elegance, these elements often felt forced and mismatched with the overall proportions of the car. The Crown seemed to be caught between trying to offer affordability and aspiring to luxury, a balance it struggled to strike effectively. From a side profile, the Crown's design was relatively plain and lacked the sleek, flowing lines that were becoming popular in Europe and the US. The roofline was relatively flat, and the car's windows were large, giving it a boxy and utilitarian appearance. The size of the windows made the body seem even bulkier, and the flat roof didn't offer the kind of sloping, aerodynamic shape seen in other cars of the time. This overall squareness gave the car an ungraceful stance, lacking the fluidity and modern look that many buyers were starting to expect in the late 1950s and early 1960s. At the rear, the Toyota Crown continued its theme of ornamentation, with chrome detailing around the taillights and a wide bumper that seemed overly heavy for the car's size. The trunk was squared off and plain, providing no sense of dynamism or motion. Instead of the curved rear ends that characterized many of the more progressive designs of the era, the Crown's rear was flat and uninteresting, further contributing to its reputation as an outdated and uninspired vehicle. In terms of performance, the early Toyota Crown was not particularly impressive either. The car was equipped with a small, underpowered engine that was adequate for city driving, but struggled on highways or under heavy loads. This lack of power, combined with the car's heavy build and old-fashioned design, meant that it was often outclassed by other vehicles in its segment. While the Crown was durable and reliable, qualities that would later become hallmarks of Toyota vehicles, its sluggish performance and clunky design made it a less appealing option compared to more modern and efficient cars of the era. Despite its shortcomings, the Toyota Crown played a significant role in establishing Toyota as a global automaker. It was one of the first Japanese cars to be exported to markets such as the United States, where it faced stiff competition from both domestic and European manufacturers. The Volvo 66, produced between 1975 and 1980, was a compact car that embodied practicality and durability, yet it failed to capture the stylish, forward-looking designs that were becoming prevalent in Europe during the 1970s. Based on the DAF 66, the Volvo 66 inherited many of its predecessors' design cues, most notably its boxy, utilitarian shape. While it was respected for its robustness and reliability, its aesthetics left much to be desired, especially when compared to the sleek, modern lines of other European cars of the era. At first glance, the Volvo 66 was not a car that impressed with its visual appeal. The boxy, upright shape of the vehicle gave it an awkward, almost rigid stance. Unlike the aerodynamic profiles that were being embraced by many automakers in the mid-1970s, the Volvo 66 seemed to cling to an outdated design philosophy that prioritized functionality over form. The car's flat panels, squared-off edges, and tall, upright body contributed to its somewhat clunky and old-fashioned appearance, making it look more like a utilitarian workhorse than a stylish European sedan. One of the most noticeable design elements of the Volvo 66 was its tiny round headlights. These small lights appeared disproportionately undersized when compared to the car's otherwise tall and blocky front end. The headlights were set within a relatively narrow front grille, which was also simple and unadorned, further emphasizing the car's utilitarian nature. This combination of small, rounded headlights and an upright, plain front fascia gave the Volvo 66 a somewhat timid, unimposing appearance, especially when viewed next to other cars of the same period that were moving towards more aggressive, streamlined designs. The side profile of the Volvo 66 did little to enhance its visual appeal. The roofline was high and almost completely flat, creating a tall, box-like silhouette. This, combined with the relatively short length of the car, made it appear awkwardly proportioned. The windows were large, particularly the rear windows, which, while providing excellent visibility for passengers, contributed to the car's upright, van-like shape. There was little to no curvature in the body panels, and the overall look was one of simplicity rather than elegance or sportiness. At the rear, the Volvo 66 maintained its boxy theme. The trunk was flat and squared off, with a pair of simple rectangular taillights. Much like the front, the rear of the car was unremarkable, offering none of the dynamic lines or tapering shapes that characterized many of its European rivals at the time. The rear bumper, like the rest of the vehicle, was functional and sturdy, but not at all stylish. The entire design seemed more focused on providing ample space and practicality than on making a visual statement. Despite its less than inspiring appearance, the Volvo 66 had its strengths, particularly in terms of engineering and durability. Volvo was well known for its commitment to safety and reliability, and the 66 carried on this tradition. It was equipped with a continuously variable transmission, CVT, a feature inherited from the DAF 66, which was innovative for the time. The CVT allowed for smooth acceleration and better fuel efficiency, which were appealing qualities in the 1970s, particularly during the oil crises that made fuel economy a significant concern for many buyers. The Volvo 66 was also a rugged little car, capable of handling rough roads and daily use with ease. Its suspension was tuned for comfort and durability, making it well-suited for drivers who valued reliability over performance or aesthetics. However, this focus on practicality came at the expense of driving excitement. The car's handling was predictable and stable, but not particularly engaging, and its small engine provided modest performance at best. The Volvo 66 was never meant to be a sporty or luxurious car, and its lackluster design seemed to reflect that mindset. In terms of interior design, the Volvo 66 followed the same utilitarian approach. The cabin was simple and functional, with a no-frills dashboard layout and basic materials. While it provided ample headroom and visibility due to its tall design, the interior lacked the refinement and modern touches that were becoming more common in other European cars of the era. It was a comfortable enough space for everyday driving, but it did not offer the kind of luxury or innovation that might have attracted buyers looking for something more upscale or stylish. The Opel Cadet A, produced from 1962 to 1965, was Opel's first post-war effort to create an affordable, compact car for the masses, but its design was far from inspiring. While the Cadet A was mechanically reliable and offered decent performance for its class, its aesthetics reflected a no-nonsense approach that prioritized function over form. The car's simple, boxy shape, tiny wheels, and unremarkable front grille gave it a dated and uninspiring look, even in the early 1960s, when car design was moving toward more streamlined and stylish forms. At the core of the Cadet A's design was its very basic, box-like structure. The car had flat, straight lines with virtually no curves or dynamic angles, resulting in a silhouette that looked more like a utilitarian vehicle than a fashionable mode of transportation. The proportions were practical, allowing for adequate interior space, but they lacked the visual appeal of more daring designs that were beginning to dominate the European market during this period. When compared to contemporaries like the Mini Cooper or the Fiat 500, both of which managed to balance functionality with charming and iconic styling, the Cadet A appeared bland and uninspired. The front of the Cadet A was perhaps the most telling example of its minimalistic design philosophy. The grille was small and plain, consisting of a few thin horizontal bars that offered no distinct character or flair. It was flanked by round, unadorned headlights that sat within a very simple, flat front fascia. This lack of ornamentation or bold design elements made the car seem utilitarian to the point of looking outdated, even at the time of its release. There were no chrome accents or stylistic touches that might have given the Cadet A a sense of personality or modernity. The car's wheels were another area where its design fell short. The Opel Cadet A rode on small, narrow wheels that seemed disproportionately tiny compared to the rest of the car's body. These wheels, combined with the vehicle's upright and boxy stance, gave the car a toy-like appearance, as though it were perched on wheels far too small to support its structure. While this was likely a cost-saving measure aimed at keeping the Cadet affordable, it detracted from the car's visual appeal and made it appear less substantial than other vehicles of its time. From a side profile, the Opel Cadet A offered little in the way of exciting or dynamic design. The roofline was flat, and the body panels were straight and unadorned, creating a look that could best be described as plain. The doors and windows were large enough to be functional, but there was no attempt to integrate any curves or angles that might have made the car appear more modern or attractive. The overall effect was one of simplicity, but not in a way that felt intentional or stylish. Instead, the Cadet A seemed to lack the design ambition that many other automakers were beginning to explore in the early 1960s. The rear of the Cadet A continued this theme of basic, functional design. The taillights were small and rectangular, positioned on either side of a flat trunk lid. Like the front, the rear offered no bold styling cues or distinguishing features that would make it stand out on the road. It was simply functional, nothing more, nothing less. The bumper was also modest, with no decorative elements to give the rear end any sense of dynamism or style. This plain, utilitarian approach extended throughout the car's design, leaving the Cadet A looking outdated and somewhat uninspired. Despite its uninspiring exterior, the Cadet A did have some redeeming qualities. Mechanically, it was a reliable and affordable car that met the needs of post-war consumers looking for simple, economical transportation. The car's interior, though also basic, offered a decent amount of space for its size, and its practicality made it a sensible choice for many buyers. Additionally, the Cadet A was lightweight, which allowed its small engine to deliver acceptable performance, especially in city driving conditions. However, none of these functional advantages could overcome the car's lackluster design. In contrast to the more daring and innovative designs emerging from other European manufacturers during the 1960s, the Opel Cadet A seemed conservative and outdated. Brands like Renault, Fiat, and Austin were introducing compact cars with unique and forward-thinking designs that would go on to become icons of the era. The Cadet A, with its boxy shape and lack of visual interest, failed to leave a lasting impression in the same way. It was simply too plain to stand out in a market that was increasingly valuing style alongside practicality. In hindsight, the Opel Cadet A is often remembered more for its role in Opel's post-war resurgence than for its design. It was a car that got the job done, providing affordable, reliable transportation to a wide range of consumers. The Wartburg 353, produced from 1966 to 1988, stands as a symbol of the utilitarian, no-frills approach that characterized much of the automotive design from the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War era. Built in East Germany, the Wartburg 353 was a workhorse aimed at providing reliable, affordable transportation, but its aesthetics were far from inspiring. Its plain, boxy design, lack of styling detail, and bulky proportions made it one of the more visually unappealing cars of its time. The 353's rudimentary appearance reflected the broader realities of Eastern Bloc engineering, where practicality, simplicity, and functionality took precedence over style, innovation, or refinement. At first glance, the Wartburg 353's exterior was undeniably plain and basic. The car's body was essentially a rectangular box on wheels, with flat, straight panels and squared-off edges. There was little attempt to incorporate any curves or dynamic lines that could have given it a more modern or attractive appearance. Its proportions were somewhat awkward, with a tall, upright stance that made the car look overly large and bulky, especially given its modest engine performance. This boxy, utilitarian shape was a far cry from the sleek, streamlined designs that were becoming common in Western Europe during the late 1960s and 1970s. One of the most noticeable design features of the Wartburg 353 was its oversized body, which seemed disproportionate for a car of its class. The large slab-sided panels made the car appear heavy and cumbersome, and the overall visual effect was one of solidity and simplicity rather than elegance or sophistication. The car's windows were relatively large, which helped provide good visibility for the driver and passengers. But this also contributed to the 353's unbalanced proportions, making it look top-heavy and awkward. The tall roofline only added to this impression, emphasizing the car's box-like appearance. The front of the Wartburg 353 was equally uninspired. The grille was minimal and utilitarian, consisting of a simple horizontal bar with a few narrow slats, offering no distinctive or eye-catching design elements. The round headlights, though functional, were not integrated in any particularly creative or stylish way. They simply sat in place without adding anything to the car's aesthetic appeal. The bumper, like much of the rest of the car, was a straightforward, functional piece of equipment, offering protection but doing little to enhance the vehicle's overall design. There was no chrome trim or decorative accents to break up the monotony of the flat front fascia, leaving the car looking drab and utilitarian. The side profile of the Wartburg 353 continued the theme of simplicity. The car's high waistline and straight body panels created a boxy, utilitarian silhouette. The wheel arches were basic and unadorned, while the small, unremarkable wheels added to the car's dated and rudimentary appearance. The doors were large and flat, with no sculpting or detailing to provide visual interest. The overall look was one of minimalism, with every design choice seemingly made in service of practicality rather than style. At the rear, the Wartburg 353 maintained its boxy shape, with a flat trunk lid and simple rectangular taillights. Like the front of the car, the rear offered no visual excitement or creativity. The bumper was once again purely functional, and there was no attempt to introduce any curves or interesting details to break up the car's otherwise blocky shape. The lack of styling elements or modern design features made the car look dated, even when it was first introduced in the mid-1960s. One of the defining characteristics of the Wartburg 353's design was its absolute lack of ornamentation. There were no chrome accents, no sleek lines, and no bold styling choices. This stark simplicity was partly a reflection of the broader economic and political environment in which the car was built. In East Germany, resources were scarce, and consumer goods were often designed with functionality and durability in mind, rather than luxury or aesthetic appeal. The Wartburg 353 was built to be affordable and easy to maintain, and its design reflected these priorities at the expense of style or modernity. Despite its unappealing design, the Wartburg 353 was relatively popular within the Eastern Bloc, where it was one of the more accessible and affordable cars available to consumers. Its two-stroke engine, though noisy and outdated by Western standards, was reliable enough for daily use, and the car's spacious interior made it practical for families. The Wartburg 353 was known for its ruggedness, capable of withstanding the often harsh driving conditions in East Germany and other Eastern Bloc countries. However, outside of the Eastern Bloc, the 353 was viewed as outdated and unimpressive, especially when compared to the more advanced and stylish cars being produced in the West. The Ford Anglia, produced from 1959 to 1968, is perhaps best remembered for its distinctive and unconventional design, particularly its backward-sloping rear window and quirky, angular shape. While Ford intended for the Anglia to stand out as a modern and innovative compact car, its unique styling choices ended up giving it a somewhat awkward and unbalanced appearance. The Anglia's unconventional look set it apart from other cars of its time, but its odd proportions and eccentric features failed to win widespread approval, making it one of the more polarizing designs of the era. One of the most unusual and defining features of the Ford Anglia was its reverse slanted rear window, a design element that was highly unusual for the time. This window, which tilted backward instead of the conventional forward slant seen on most cars, was intended to be a functional innovation. Ford's reasoning was that this backward slope would reduce glare from the sun and improve rear visibility. Additionally, it allowed for a larger trunk opening by keeping the rear window compact. However, while the concept may have had practical merits, the aesthetic result was less than graceful. The rear window gave the car a peculiar and unbalanced look, as it disrupted the flow of the roofline and created a visual dissonance between the front and rear of the vehicle. The overall shape of the Ford Anglia was another source of its quirky appearance. The car's front end was boxy and upright, with an almost toy-like, squarish nose. The headlights were set in round housings, but they were positioned at the edges of the car, which, combined with the angular front grille, gave the Anglia a somewhat bug-eyed expression. The grille itself was simple and rectangular, without any sleek or modern curves to soften the car's appearance. Instead, the flat angular surfaces made the front end look rigid and somewhat outdated, even in the 1960s when more fluid and aerodynamic designs were becoming fashionable in the automotive world. The side profile of the Anglia was similarly unremarkable, with flat, straight panels that contributed to its overall boxy appearance. The car's short wheelbase and tall stance made it look slightly disproportionate, with more emphasis on height than length. The upright body also lacked the sweeping, dynamic lines that were becoming more common in car design during the 1960s. Instead of looking sleek or modern, the Anglia appeared functional and somewhat utilitarian, more concerned with practicality than visual appeal. The flat roofline, combined with the backward-sloping rear window, only served to exaggerate the car's unusual proportions. From the rear, the Ford Anglia's design continued to challenge conventional aesthetics. The reverse slanted rear window, while functional, created an abrupt visual contrast with the rest of the car's body. The flat, squared-off trunk and simple taillights added to the car's overall boxy appearance, and there was little in the way of design flourishes or modern touches to break up the stark lines. The car's rear bumper was simple and utilitarian, offering no chrome accents or decorative elements to enhance the look. The back end of the Anglia, like the front, was focused on functionality rather than style. Despite its unconventional appearance, the Ford Anglia did have a few redeeming qualities that helped it gain a loyal following. Mechanically, the Anglia was a reliable and practical car, well-suited for the needs of small families and budget-conscious drivers in post-war Britain. It was also relatively affordable, which made it accessible to a wide range of consumers. The Anglia's compact size and lightweight construction allowed for decent fuel efficiency and adequate performance for city driving. However, these practical advantages couldn't overcome the fact that the car's design left much to be desired, especially for those who valued aesthetics as much as functionality. The interior of the Anglia was similarly focused on practicality rather than luxury or style. The dashboard was simple and utilitarian, with basic controls and minimal ornamentation. The seats were comfortable enough for short trips, but lacked the refinement or plushness found in more upscale models of the time. The Anglia's interior was spacious for a car of its size thanks to its boxy shape, but it was clear that Ford had prioritized function over form in both the exterior and interior design of the vehicle. When compared to other cars from the same era, the Ford Anglia's design seemed especially out of step with the more modern, streamlined shapes that were becoming popular. For instance, the Mini Cooper, which debuted around the same time, featured a much more cohesive and charming design that blended compact dimensions with playful curves. Similarly, cars from American manufacturers were embracing longer, sleeker forms that conveyed a sense of speed and sophistication. The Tatra 603, produced in Czechoslovakia from 1956 to 1975, was undoubtedly one of the most distinctive and unconventional cars of its time. Its design, which combined an air-cooled rear engine, a long, sloping rear, and a rounded front end, made it stand out in a crowd, though not always for positive reasons. One of the car's most recognizable features was its trio of headlights, arranged in a horizontal row across the front. While Tatra intended the 603 to be a symbol of technical innovation and luxury in Eastern Europe, its unusual appearance often attracted ridicule, with some likening it to a submarine on wheels. The most striking aspect of the Tatra 603's design was its front end. The car's three headlight setup was highly unconventional, with the lights positioned in a straight line across the nose. This gave the car a somewhat strange, bug-eyed look, which was very different from the more streamlined, two headlight designs that were common in Western Europe and the United States at the time. The grille was minimal and tucked away, as the air-cooled engine didn't require the same kind of large front intake as water-cooled cars. This resulted in a front fascia that was smooth and featureless apart from the headlights, which only emphasized the car's odd appearance. The rounded front end of the Tatra 603 added to its submarine-like look. The hood gently curved downward, blending into the front fenders in a soft, sweeping line. While this design gave the car an aerodynamic profile, it also contributed to its somewhat bloated and bulbous appearance, especially when viewed from the side. The combination of the rounded front and the prominent bug-eyed headlights created a visual effect that was more peculiar than elegant, causing the car to be ridiculed by those who preferred the sleek, sharp lines of Western cars from the same period. Moving toward the rear, the Tatra 603's design became even more distinctive. The car featured a long, sloping rear end that housed its rear-mounted air-cooled engine. The smooth, teardrop-shaped silhouette of the car tapered gradually from the roofline down to the rear bumper, giving it an almost aerodynamic, streamlined look. However, the proportions of the car were unusual, as the elongated rear section seemed to overpower the rest of the body, creating an imbalance between the front and back. This elongated rear also gave the car a somewhat awkward, submarine-like appearance, especially when combined with the bulbous front end. One of the reasons for this unusual design was the Tatra 603's rear engine layout, which was a hallmark of Tatra's engineering philosophy. By placing the engine in the rear, Tatra engineers were able to optimize the car's weight distribution, which in theory should have improved handling and ride quality. However, this also meant that the car's design had to accommodate the engine in the back, leading to the long, sloping rear that defined its silhouette. While this layout had its engineering advantages, it did little to enhance the car's visual appeal. The overall proportions of the Tatra 603 were another source of criticism. The car was large and heavy, with a high roofline and wide body that made it look somewhat ungainly on the road. Its size and bulk were at odds with the sleek, low-slung designs that were becoming popular in the West, making the 603 appear outdated and awkward in comparison. The high roofline, while practical for providing ample headroom for passengers, contributed to the car's top-heavy appearance, further accentuating its unusual proportions. Despite its odd appearance, the Tatra 603 was considered a luxury vehicle in Czechoslovakia and other Eastern Bloc countries. It was primarily used by government officials and party elites, as it was one of the few high-end cars available in the region at the time. The interior of the Tatra 603 was spacious and comfortable, with plush seats and generous legroom, making it a suitable car for long-distance travel. However, the car's utilitarian, state-driven origins were evident in its lack of refinement compared to Western luxury cars. While it offered a smooth and stable ride, its styling left much to be desired for those who valued aesthetics as much as comfort. Another element that set the Tatra 603 apart was its air-cooled V8 engine, a rarity in the automotive world at the time. The engine was mounted in the rear, in line with Tatra's tradition of rear-engine design, and provided decent power for a car of its size. However, the engine's air cooling system was noisier and less efficient than the water-cooled systems used in most other cars of the era, further contributing to the perception that the Tatra 603 was an oddity, both in terms of design and performance. The Bug, produced in Britain from 1970 to 1974, was a car that truly embraced the radical design trends of the era. Its most defining characteristic was its bold wedge shape, which gave the car an unmistakably futuristic look. At a time when the automotive industry was experimenting with new forms and ideas, the Bug stood out with its dramatic, angular lines and daring aesthetics. However, while the design was certainly attention-grabbing, it often strayed into the territory of the absurd, making the car look more like a novelty or toy than a practical vehicle. The bright orange color of the Bug only added to its playful, almost cartoonish appearance. This vivid hue was the car's signature, further emphasizing its outlandish design. The car's designers likely hoped that its flashy look would appeal to young buyers looking for something futuristic and fun, but the result was a vehicle that was often seen as more of a joke than a serious car. The Bug's aesthetic could be described as something straight out of a 1970s sci-fi movie, with its low-slung body, sharp wedge profile, and cockpit-like cabin lending it an otherworldly feel. One of the most unique features of the Bug was its three-wheeled layout. Unlike traditional four-wheeled cars, the Bug had a single front wheel and two rear wheels, which contributed to its distinctive shape. This three-wheeled configuration was meant to make the car lighter and more economical, but it also gave it a slightly unstable appearance, particularly when viewed from the front. The single front wheel seemed almost lost beneath the sharp wedge of the car's nose, adding to the sense that this was more of an oddity than a true automobile. The cockpit-style cabin was another interesting feature of the Bug. To enter the car, drivers and passengers would lift the entire canopy, which hinged at the rear, revealing a two-seater interior. This unconventional approach to car doors further reinforced the Bug's futuristic vibe, as it was a clear departure from traditional designs. Once inside, the cramped quarters and Spartan interior gave the sense that the car was built more for novelty than for comfort or practicality. The seating was low to the ground, and the view out of the small, sloping windshield created a unique, almost go-kart-like driving experience. While this setup might have been exciting for some, it likely felt restrictive and uncomfortable for anyone used to the roomier interiors of more conventional cars. Despite its playful and futuristic intentions, the Bug was far from a commercial success. Its extreme design, while certainly eye-catching, limited its appeal to a very specific audience. The wedge shape, bright orange paint, and three-wheeled layout made the car stand out. But these same features also made it impractical for everyday use. Its small size, lack of storage space, and low performance made it more of a novelty or second car rather than a practical daily driver. In terms of performance, the Bug was powered by a small engine, which provided modest acceleration at best. The car's lightweight design meant it could achieve reasonable speeds, but its handling, particularly due to its three-wheeled configuration, was far from ideal. Cornering in the Bug could feel precarious, and the car's narrow front end made it prone to instability at higher speeds. While it was never meant to be a high-performance vehicle, the Bug's quirky design didn't translate into an exceptional driving experience, which may have further limited its appeal. The Bug's visual design also faced the challenge of being a little too ahead of its time, or perhaps too far outside the mainstream. While it embraced the daring, angular lines and vibrant colors that would come to define some of the more experimental cars of the 1970s, its extreme styling didn't quite resonate with the general public. As a result, the car remained more of a curiosity than a trendsetter, remembered today more for its eccentric appearance than for any lasting impact on the automotive world. Looking back, the Bond bug is often celebrated as a symbol of 1970s British automotive eccentricity. It represents a time when car manufacturers were willing to take risks, experimenting with radical designs in the hopes of capturing the imagination of a new generation of drivers. In this sense, the Bond bug was successful. It is certainly one of the most memorable and distinctive cars of the era. However, its legacy is more one of novelty than of innovation. While the car has a dedicated following among enthusiasts who appreciate its quirky charm, it never achieved mainstream success, and its oddball design remains its most defining feature. In the end, the Bond bug remains an icon of its time, a car that dared to be different, but ultimately fell short of being practical or widely desirable. The Ford Consul Classic, produced between 1961 and 1963, was an intriguing attempt by Ford of Britain to blend American flair with European sensibility. However, in trying to merge these two stylistic worlds, the Consul Classic ended up with a design that felt disjointed and out of balance. Its odd combination of bold, American-inspired elements, such as tail fins and chrome accents, paired with the compact dimensions typical of European cars, created a vehicle that looked as if it couldn't decide which side of the Atlantic it belonged to. One of the most notable and unusual features of the Ford Consul Classic was its twin headlight design. The four round headlights were stacked vertically, housed in square bezels, which gave the front of the car a somewhat bug-eyed and unconventional appearance. This was a far cry from the more elegant horizontal headlight arrangements that were common at the time, and the vertical alignment immediately set the Consul Classic apart on the road. But rather than being seen as a stylish or innovative touch, this design element was often criticized for being awkward and clunky, contributing to the car's overall confused look. Moving to the rear of the car, the situation didn't improve much. The Consul Classic featured sharply angled tail fins, a design cue clearly borrowed from American automotive trends of the late 1950s. Tail fins had become symbolic of the rocket age optimism in American car design, with manufacturers like Cadillac and Chevrolet embracing them as symbols of progress and speed. However, by the early 1960s, tail fins were already starting to fall out of fashion, and on the smaller, more reserved Consul Classic, they looked exaggerated and out of place. The car's relatively compact European proportions didn't harmonize with the grandiose, swooping fins, resulting in a rear end that felt bulky and unbalanced. This lack of cohesion between the front and rear design further added to the Consul Classic's aesthetic identity crisis. While the front was trying to look futuristic and innovative with its unique headlight setup, the rear was pulling from a trend that was already on its way out. The lines of the car didn't flow naturally, and the transition from the front to the back felt abrupt, as if two different design philosophies had been awkwardly stitched together. In terms of overall body shape, the Ford Consul Classic was more angular and boxy than many of its contemporaries, which were beginning to adopt the more curved, flowing lines that would dominate the 1960s. Its relatively tall roofline, combined with the slab-sided body panels, gave the car an upright, almost stilted appearance. The Consul Classic's proportions were neither sleek nor sporty, and while it was intended to offer a slightly more upscale option in Ford's lineup, the car's visual clumsiness meant that it never fully conveyed the elegance or refinement that buyers of the era were increasingly seeking. The design of the Ford Consul Classic was also hampered by its awkward detailing. The rear window, for example, was concave, an unusual choice that, while distinctive, didn't quite fit with the rest of the car's angular lines. This quirky feature might have been meant to add a touch of uniqueness or modernity, but in practice it just added to the overall feeling of dissonance in the car's design. The trim and chrome detailing, while present, felt underwhelming and didn't do much to enhance the car's appearance or tie together its disparate elements. On the road, the Consul Classic was an odd sight, and its polarizing design was far from universally admired. For some, the unusual styling choices made the car stand out, but for many others, it was simply a confusing mix of ideas that didn't come together into a cohesive whole. Compared to its more streamlined and harmonious competitors, The console classic was often seen as an aesthetic misstep, a car that tried to do too much and ended up looking more peculiar than desirable. Underneath the eccentric exterior, the Ford Console Classic was a competent but unremarkable performer. It came with a modest engine and offered decent handling for the time, but its driving experience was overshadowed by its visual oddities. Buyers who were put off by the car's unconventional looks might have missed the fact that it was relatively practical for its size, with adequate interior space and reasonable reliability. However, the overall package, especially from a design perspective, did not have the mass appeal that Ford had hoped for, and the car's production run was brief. In retrospect, the Ford Console Classic is often remembered more for its visual quirks than for its performance or contribution to the automotive world. It stands as a reminder of the risks manufacturers take when they attempt to blend design trends from different regions and eras, and how those risks don't always pay off. The Triumph Mayflower, produced between 1949 and 1953, is often remembered as one of the more unusual-looking cars of its time. Its design, which appeared out of sync with the sleek, modern lines that were beginning to dominate post-war automotive styling, was undeniably distinctive, but ultimately clunky and awkward. The car was intended to be a small, affordable vehicle with an air of luxury, but its old-fashioned, boxy appearance made it look more like a shrunken, overly angular version of a Rolls-Royce than a true compact car. One of the most striking features of the Triumph Mayflower was its tall, upright grille, which gave the car a stern and imposing front end that seemed too large for its relatively small body. The grille, coupled with a sharply angled roofline and slab-sided body, lent the car a rather rigid, formal look that was at odds with the smoother, more flowing designs that were emerging in the late 1940s and early 1950s. The designers may have hoped to evoke a sense of British elegance and refinement, but the result was more awkward than stately. The roofline, in particular, was one of the most unusual aspects of the Mayflower's design. While many cars of the era were adopting lower, more streamlined profiles, the Mayflower's roof was sharply angled and tall, giving it a boxy, almost stunted appearance. This upright design made the car look top-heavy and unbalanced, with the narrow body struggling to support the large, slab-like roof. The overall effect was a car that seemed more suited to an earlier, pre-war era than the modern world of the 1950s, where curves and aerodynamic shapes were becoming the norm. The Triumph Mayflower was clearly inspired by luxury cars like the Rolls-Royce, but it lacked the grace and proportion that made those vehicles iconic. The attempt to shrink these grand, opulent design cues into a small, budget-friendly car resulted in an odd mix of stateliness and awkwardness. The sharp angles, boxy lines, and exaggerated upright features might have conveyed a sense of formality, but they also made the car look ungainly and unattractive. Another design element that didn't quite work was the car's small, narrow wheels. The tiny wheels, combined with the tall, boxy body, made the car look disproportionate, as if the wheels were struggling to support the vehicle's bulk. This imbalance further detracted from the Mayflower's overall aesthetic appeal, giving it a toy-like quality that clashed with its aspirations to appear elegant and refined. Inside, the Mayflower offered a more comfortable experience, with its upright stance providing a decent amount of interior space for a small car. However, this wasn't enough to compensate for its outdated and unattractive exterior design. While it may have been reasonably practical and affordable for its time, its appearance overshadowed these qualities. The car's quirky looks, combined with its modest performance, meant that it failed to capture the public's imagination in the way Triumph had hoped. From a performance standpoint, the Triumph Mayflower was as unremarkable as its design was controversial. It was powered by a small four-cylinder engine that provided modest acceleration, making the car suitable for city driving, but far from exciting on the open road. The Mayflower was also known for its relatively heavy weight for such a small car, which further dampened its performance. While it wasn't a bad car mechanically, it didn't offer much to excite drivers, and its sluggish performance didn't help its already questionable image. Despite its shortcomings, the Triumph Mayflower did have a certain charm for a niche group of buyers who appreciated its quirky design and compact dimensions. It found a small following among those who wanted a car that stood out from the crowd, even if it did so for the wrong reasons. However, for the majority of consumers, the Mayflower's combination of boxy, outdated styling, and uninspiring performance made it a tough sell. In the context of automotive history, the Triumph Mayflower is often seen as an example of a car that tried to do too much and ended up achieving too little. It aimed to bring luxury design elements to a smaller, more affordable vehicle, but the execution fell flat. The car's old-fashioned looks made it seem out of step with the times, and its clunky, awkward proportions did little to win over buyers in an era that was increasingly valuing sleekness and modernity. Today, the Triumph Mayflower is remembered more for its eccentric design than for its impact on the automotive world. Its tall grille, boxy shape, and Rolls-Royce-inspired cues make it a curiosity of British car design, a vehicle that stands out precisely because it didn't fit in. While it may not have been a success in its time, the Mayflower's quirky, old-fashioned appearance ensures that it remains an interesting footnote in Triumph's history. A car that dared to be different but ultimately missed the mark. The Renault Doofen, produced from 1956 to 1967, was a car that epitomized the quirks of mid-20th century automotive design. With its small rear-engine configuration and rounded, bulbous shape, the Doofen stood out in the crowded market of compact cars. However, its peculiar design often drew mixed reviews, as it seemed to clash with the more modern, streamlined aesthetics that were becoming popular during its production years. At first glance, the Doofen's design is characterized by its soft curves and rounded edges, giving it a somewhat cartoonish appearance. The body shape, which seemed to bubble outward, contributed to a look that many considered to be unstable or awkward. Its proportions, particularly when combined with the tiny wheels, created an unsettling visual effect. The small tires appeared to struggle to support the car's bulk, lending it a precarious stance on the road. This unsettling aspect of the design was often pointed out by critics, who felt that the car looked like it could easily tip over with the slightest miscalculation. While the Doofen enjoyed considerable popularity in France and became a symbol of post-war automotive design, it often faced criticism for its aesthetic shortcomings. Unlike contemporaries that featured more sleek and aerodynamic profiles, the Doofen's design felt outdated, even during its heyday. The bulbous shape, combined with its relatively high roofline, made it look somewhat reminiscent of a small van or delivery vehicle rather than a stylish family car. As a result, it was often overshadowed by rivals that embraced the smoother lines and modern silhouettes that were gaining traction in the automotive world. Under the hood, the Renault Doofen was powered by a modest 845 cubic centimeter four-cylinder engine, which was also positioned at the rear of the vehicle. While this arrangement offered advantages in terms of handling and traction, especially in adverse weather conditions, it contributed to the car's quirky overall appearance. The engine placement also meant that the car had a unique weight distribution, leading to some unusual handling characteristics that made it feel less stable compared to its front-engine competitors. Although this rear-engine layout allowed for a spacious interior and decent cargo capacity, it often left drivers wanting more power and responsiveness. The interior of the Doofen, while practical, was similarly influenced by its design philosophy. The dashboard was functional, but lacked the flair and sophistication of its contemporaries. The use of simple, utilitarian materials reflected the car's budget-friendly positioning, which was an appealing aspect for many buyers during a time of economic recovery in Europe. However, the basic layout and sparse features did little to enhance the overall experience, contributing to a sense of dullness that many associated with the Doofen. Despite its shortcomings, the Renault Doofen managed to carve out a niche for itself in the automotive market. It became a popular choice among families looking for an economical and reliable vehicle during the post-war boom. The car's affordability and practicality outweighed its aesthetic deficiencies for many buyers, leading to significant sales in France and abroad. The Doofen's unique styling, combined with its compact dimensions, made it a favorite for urban driving, where maneuverability and ease of parking were essential. In the realm of automotive history, the Renault Doofen occupies a unique position. While it may not have achieved the same iconic status as other vehicles of its era, it certainly made an impact as a symbol of the period's design trends. The Doofen is often remembered for its distinctive shape, even if that shape didn't resonate with everyone. Today, it serves as a reminder of a time when car design was in a state of experimentation and evolution, as manufacturers sought to redefine what a small family car could be. In retrospect, the Renault Doofen is both a product of its time and an example of the challenges faced by manufacturers in adapting to changing tastes. Its rounded design, while innovative in some respects, ultimately fell out of favor as the industry moved towards more aerodynamic and refined forms. Yet the Doofen's popularity in its day speaks to the car's practicality and the value placed on affordability in the post-war era. As such, it remains an interesting footnote in automotive history, celebrated by enthusiasts for its quirky charm and remembered for its role in shaping the compact car market in Europe. The Ford Taunus P3, produced from 1960 to 1964, is an interesting chapter in automotive history, often affectionately referred to as the Badwan, or bathtub, by German enthusiasts. This nickname aptly encapsulates its distinctive, curvaceous body shape, which deviated dramatically from the more angular designs that characterized much of the automotive landscape during its era. While the Taunus P3 was an ambitious attempt to redefine family car aesthetics, its unconventional appearance led to mixed reactions, with many critics deeming it an unattractive vehicle. At first glance, the Taunus P3's design is marked by its rounded, bulbous contours that appear to roll from one curve to the next. The wide, sweeping fenders and rounded roofline contribute to its bathtub look, giving the car an almost whimsical appearance that stood in a stark contrast to the sharp lines and flat surfaces favored by many contemporary manufacturers. This lack of conventionality meant that the Taunus P3 was easily distinguishable on the road, but not necessarily in a positive light. Critics often remarked that it looked more like an appliance than a car, and its unusual design choices led to a polarizing reception. The front end of the Taunus P3 featured a prominent, wide grille framed by large, rounded headlights that added to its unique visual language. While some may have found this feature charming, others criticized it as being overly simplistic and lacking the sophistication seen in competing models. The overall composition of the car appeared more functional than stylish, as if practicality had been prioritized over aesthetic appeal. This led to a perception that the Taunus P3 was more suited for utility than for pleasing the eye. In terms of performance, the Ford Taunus P3 was equipped with a range of engines that offered modest power and reasonable fuel efficiency. Buyers could choose from several four-cylinder engine options, which were adequate for everyday driving, but did not provide the excitement or dynamism that some competitors offered. The car's design, while spacious and comfortable for passengers, did not translate into a particularly engaging driving experience. Many owners appreciated its practicality and reliability, but the driving dynamics often felt uninspiring compared to sportier models available at the time. The interior of the Taunus P3 reflected the same philosophy of practicality that defined its exterior. The cabin was spacious, with ample room for passengers, making it a suitable family vehicle. However, the design and materials used were rather basic, lacking the refinement and comfort found in more stylish contemporaries. The dashboard was straightforward and functional, prioritizing ease of use over aesthetics, which contributed to the car's utilitarian image. This emphasis on functionality over form extended to the seating and overall layout, which, while comfortable, did not leave a lasting impression on buyers. Despite its peculiar design, the Ford Taunus P3 found a dedicated following in the German market. Many buyers appreciated the car's affordability, spaciousness, and practicality, leading to solid sales figures during its production run. Its uniqueness became a point of interest for some, with collectors and enthusiasts drawn to its distinctive appearance. Over time, the Taunus P3 has become a symbol of 1960s automotive design, representing a moment when manufacturers experimented with new shapes and forms, even if they did not always resonate positively with consumers. In retrospect, The Ford Taunus P3 is an intriguing example of automotive design that challenges conventional beauty standards. While it may not have achieved the acclaim of its more stylish peers, its legacy lies in its willingness to break away from the norm. The car's rounded body, coupled with its practical engineering, made it a significant model in Ford's lineup during the era, illustrating the company's commitment to catering to the needs of everyday drivers. Today, the Taunus P3 is often regarded with nostalgia, celebrated for its quirky and distinctive aesthetic. It stands as a testament to a time when automotive design was exploring the boundaries of form and function, resulting in vehicles that were as unique as they were practical. While it may have been dubbed an ugly duckling in its day, the Ford Taunus P3 has garnered a place in the hearts of collectors and enthusiasts, reminding us that beauty can often be found in the most unexpected places. The NSU Prince, produced between 1958 and 1973, represents an interesting chapter in the evolution of small cars, particularly within the German automotive landscape. Designed as an economical and compact vehicle, the Prince aimed to cater to a post-war market that valued functionality and affordability over aesthetics. However, its simplistic and boxy design, characterized by awkward proportions, often led to it being perceived more as a toy car than a serious contender in the automotive world. At first glance, the Prince's design is immediately striking for its compact dimensions and high roofline. The narrow body and elevated silhouette give it a somewhat disproportionate appearance, as if it were a miniature version of a larger car that had been squashed down. This visual imbalance resulted in a vehicle that lacked the sporty or dynamic lines that many contemporary cars were beginning to adopt. Instead, the Prince presented an image of utilitarianism, with flat panels and angular shapes that emphasize practicality over style. The front of the NSU Prince features a simplistic grille and round headlights that contribute to its functional appearance. While this design approach helped keep production costs low, it also led to a somewhat bland and uninspiring face. The lack of bold design elements meant that the Prince could easily blend into the background of the automotive landscape, failing to stand out among its peers. Unlike more stylish rivals that flaunted their curves and sleek profiles, the Prince seemed to shy away from any aesthetic flair, focusing instead on its role as a basic mode of transportation. Underneath its modest exterior, the NSU Prince was equipped with a small, air-cooled, four-cylinder engine, which provided adequate power for city driving, but lacked the performance that enthusiasts might have craved. The engine's placement at the rear contributed to a unique weight distribution that offered decent handling characteristics, particularly in urban environments where its compact size shone. However, the driving experience was often described as uninspiring. The Prince was primarily designed for efficiency and reliability rather than excitement. It excelled at delivering economical commutes rather than thrilling drives. Inside the cabin, the Prince maintained its focus on functionality. The interior layout was straightforward and unpretentious, with minimal creature comforts. While the seating arrangement provided sufficient space for passengers, the materials used and overall design were basic and utilitarian. The dashboard was simple, with essential gauges and controls that prioritized ease of use over aesthetics. This lack of refinement extended to the overall driving experience, where the emphasis remained firmly on practicality. As the years passed, the NSU Prince's design did not age gracefully. The boxy shape and high roofline, which may have seemed functional in the late 1950s, began to look increasingly outdated compared to the more modern and dynamic designs that emerged in the 1960s and early 1970s. As consumers began to favor vehicles with a more contemporary aesthetic, the Prince struggled to maintain its relevance in an evolving market. While it served its purpose as an economical choice for many buyers, it lacked the charm or visual appeal that might have attracted a broader audience. Despite its design shortcomings, the NSU Prince found a niche among budget-conscious buyers looking for a reliable and economical vehicle. Its compact size made it an ideal choice for urban driving, where maneuverability and parking ease were crucial considerations. Many owners appreciated the Prince for its low operating costs and straightforward maintenance, making it a practical choice in a period of economic recovery in post-war Germany. In the context of automotive history, the NSU Prince is often remembered for its role as one of the early representatives of small cars in Germany. While it may not have been the most glamorous model of its time, its legacy lies in its practicality and affordability. It served as a reminder that a car's value could be measured not solely by its design, but also by its ability to meet the needs of everyday drivers. Today, the NSU Prince stands as a nostalgic reminder of a bygone era when functionality and simplicity were prized in car design. Enthusiasts appreciate it for its quirky charm and straightforward engineering, celebrating it as a piece of automotive history. Though it may have been labeled as a toy car due to its proportions and design, the Prince is fondly regarded by those who recognize its significance in the evolution of compact cars and its contribution to the automotive landscape of its time. The Simca Vedette, produced from 1954 to 1961, is a fascinating example of a French automobile that attempted to capture the spirit of American automotive design while struggling to fit into the more compact and practical framework of European vehicles. With its ambitious attempt at emulating the glamour and style of American cars, the Vedette showcased features such as a large chrome grille and flamboyant tail fins. However, its execution left much to be desired, leading to a design that felt both forced and out of place in its intended market. At first glance, the Simca Vedette's design presents a striking image. The large chrome grille dominates the front fascia, giving the car a bold and assertive presence reminiscent of the American models of the era. This grille was intended to evoke a sense of grandeur and luxury, but in reality, it often overwhelmed the rest of the vehicle's proportions. The oversized proportions of the car contributed to a somewhat clumsy appearance, with a body that seemed bulkier than necessary for a European compact. The attempt to incorporate elements of American design, such as the expansive front and pronounced rear fins, came off as an awkward imitation rather than a harmonious blend of styles. The body shape of the Vedette, with its boxy silhouette, further complicated its visual appeal. Unlike the sleek lines and elegant curves found on many of its American counterparts, the Vedette's design was rigid and unrefined, creating a dissonance between its styling cues and its actual shape. The sharp angles and flat panels did not contribute to the aerodynamic feel that many contemporary cars were beginning to adopt. Instead, the car appeared more utilitarian, a point emphasized by its heavy proportions and lack of finesse in its overall design language. The tail fins, which were a hallmark of 1950s American cars, were included in the Vedette's design, but felt more like an afterthought than an integrated element. While they aimed to convey a sense of motion and excitement, in practice they added to the car's awkwardness, making it look as though it was trying too hard to fit a mold that it simply could not occupy. This stylistic clash was compounded by the fact that the Vedette was a mid-sized car in a market increasingly dominated by compact and practical vehicles. The bulky aesthetic did not resonate with the growing demand for smaller, more efficient cars that could navigate Europe's congested streets with ease. Underneath its flamboyant exterior, the Simca Vedette was powered by a range of engines that provided adequate performance for daily driving. The inline-4 engine options were not particularly powerful, but they offered a decent driving experience for a car of its class. However, the driving dynamics were often described as uninspiring, with the Vedette focusing more on providing a comfortable ride than delivering a spirited performance. This reflected a broader trend in the automotive industry at the time, where comfort often took precedence over sportiness, especially in the family sedan segment. Inside the Vedette, the interior design mirrored the exterior's ambitious styling, featuring a spacious cabin that prioritized comfort and functionality. The dashboard was relatively simple, with straightforward controls and gauges, but it lacked the refinement or modern touches that were becoming more common in the industry. While the car offered ample space for passengers, the materials used and overall aesthetic felt dated, failing to match the boldness of the exterior design. The lack of attention to detail in the interior further contributed to the perception that the Vedette was an awkward compromise between European practicality and American extravagance. Despite its design shortcomings, the Simca Vedette found a niche among consumers who appreciated its unique styling and spaciousness. It appealed to buyers looking for a family car that stood out from the more conventional offerings of the time. However, its inability to fully realize its design aspirations meant that it never gained the same level of acclaim as its more successful contemporaries. Over time, the Simca Vedette became a symbol of the challenges faced by manufacturers attempting to adapt American design influences to the European market. While it showcased a willingness to innovate and experiment, the results ultimately fell short of expectations. As the automotive landscape evolved, the Vedette's awkwardness became more pronounced against a backdrop of sleek and stylish designs that dominated the market. Today, the Simca Vedette is often viewed with nostalgia, appreciated for its unique attempt to blend two distinct automotive cultures. While it may not have achieved the aesthetic success its designers had envisioned, it remains an important piece of automotive history, reflecting the era's aspirations and challenges. Enthusiasts recognize it as a curious artifact of the mid-20th century,